Council Committee of the Whole to order. We'll have an adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Been made and seconded. Any additions or corrections? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We'll move into discussion of financing and site development options for the downtown Riverfront property. Gonna be a lot of things we need to talk about and discuss tonight. Some of the stuff on the thought process is budget, bonding, including the loans, costs of both developments, how we kind of want to move forward with each development process, both of them, one, none of them. With that said, I know Judy, you got some stuff with bonding that you'd like to discuss first.
I
We'll lead
do.
out with that.
As when Chad came to me and he kind of talked about the downtown project, I thought one of the things that you guys probably need to understand is if you're going to develop something down on the downtown project, what does that look like and what are your options for that? And what is our debt capacity and how does that work over time? So I actually was going to sit at that whiteboard up there and kind of give you an idea of where we are at with the city as far as, and I don't know, can the people up there are going to be able to see what I'm presenting?
Yep, I got it all
You
set up,
rock
ready to
and
go.
roll.
If I can make this
Okay.
work, all right.
So I'm just going to give you a little bit of 101 accounting here of where the city is at.
Perfect.
Tough class.
You're gonna have a test.
I doubt it, but okay.
We're at midnight.
So Brent Nelson went through, and this is pulled right straight from the audit, and he talked about where we are at with debt today for the city of New London. And he talked about how our capacity is, we currently have a capacity of 20,400,000. Okay, so that's where the city sits today, and that's figured by equalized value. So any community can take out debt up to 5% of equalized value. But when you go out to bond, and in order to get a good bond rating, Phil Cosson will tell you, you want to hold on to 1/3 of your capacity. Otherwise, what happens is your interest rates will start to inch up, and or they won't want to give you the money. So you want to keep 1/3 of this. So we're at 6.8. Can you see okay, Mayor?
Yes, yes.
So that leaves us at about 13,600,000. I'll get a new pen. Okay. So this is where we're at. This is what, you know, your financial consultants are going to say, don't go beyond this point, or if you go beyond this point, it's not the end of the world, but you want to do it 1-2 years. And then you want to see that coming back down to this point. So a bonding agent isn't going to necessarily look at you that poorly because you're above this, as long as they know within a 2-year period or 3-year period, you're going to see that come back down into the more normal numbers. Okay, so we currently have about 8.6. So that's where we're currently at in debt. So this is the number pulled right from our audit. So you can check these numbers when you go home if you want to, but this comes right straight from our audit on page 56. So if you want to take a look at this when you go home, this is all that I'm talking about tonight is straight from our audit. Okay, so that leaves us today at about $5 million or 970. Okay, so this is where we are today. This is how much debt that we could take out as a city today. All right, $5 million. I put together a capital projects list, as you all know, a 5-year capital projects list. And I asked all the department heads to give me a wish list. What would what would it look like if we could do everything we wanted to do in the next 5 years? The first year was $3.2 million. Year 2, $3.5 million. Year 3, 4.6, and 2024, $6.6 million. And this is where we sit today. So we have, as committees, as council people, you have a lot of choices to make moving forward, including what is our downtown riverfront project going to look like? And and that's in here. So that's that $6.6 million. That's the downtown. That's why in 2024, you see the amount of money that the city needs in bonding or in revenue to pay for what we're looking for in our future, just to keep the infrastructure moving forward with these projects. Now, there's a lot of things on here you can't bond for. So besides the dollar amount within here, you have to have at least a 30-year useful life, or Jill's gonna say you can't put that in a bonding because it'll be gone before the bonding's paid for. So it doesn't make any sense. You want a 20-year bond, but you want that infrastructure to last 30 years, or it doesn't make any sense for you to bond for those dollars. Okay, so here we sit today. I just talked to Phil. We have a number of projects, like I said. So we were looking at bonding this year, and then I'm looking at the downtown in 2024. So when are we going to bond for that? We're going to do it in 2024, or are we going to do it in 2023 and take a look at another project at that time? So if we're looking at a $2.5 million bonding today, where does that leave us going into the future? So if we did a $2.5 million bonding next month, this is probably what we're going to be suggesting. And I'm going to tell you in those projects is going to be Warner Allen. We're going to be looking at a number of roof projects we've been putting off. So that includes the police department, the library, the city hall. I think there's 5 or 6 roof projects that need to be done. So Warner Allen, roof projects, the trail that we've already received grant funding for. So we're looking at that. And then our fire department is looking at some big capital purchases. They have a tender tanker. So we add those 6 projects together, $2.5 million.
Hey, Judy,
That's where we are for those. I am not saying that that's what we are going to do. Going to be some of the suggestions that come up in our September meeting of the bigger projects that we look at to be paid for through this bonding. Go ahead.
is Warner Allen Road before Oshkosh Street?
It is. On the priority list, Warner Allen is first and Oshkosh is next.
Okay.
So Oshkosh Street, we're looking at in the next bonding along with the downtown. So that is one of the things on the high priority list for the 2023 or 2024 bonding. So that is one of the high priority streets we are looking at. So here we are today. That leaves us with about 2.7447. Okay. So I talked to Phil, I'm like, okay, can we bond for $3 million today and then $6 million in 2024? Because we have a big project going on downtown. And that project in and of itself is $3 million. Oshkosh Street is $2 million. So what are we looking for in funding in 2024 to help us pay for this huge list of projects and roads that we need to get done? So if you look at the capacity that we have, one of the things you have to remember is we're paying money back as we go along. So if you look at the current list, we're paying about $360,000 a year. So if you add that to this, that gets us closer to the $6 million that we're looking for in 2 years. Now, what that project's going to look like, what kind of money that's going to look like, we have no idea at this time. Right now, we need to focus on what is this going to pay for? What are we going to do with this money? I mean, there's some strong priority lists that I would definitely consider as a group. And you guys have been going through this forever. This is no surprise to you of what's sitting on those capital projects lists. You've been talking about them for years. So we will be moving forward with 2.5 million. When I talked about 3 to fill, he said I would rather see we stick closer to the 2.5 million. I will be meeting with Fire Chief Mark tomorrow. We'll be talking about some of his needs. Can we push some of his needs off till the next bonding? How else can we look at possibly funding those? Some other options are when we look at Oshkosh Street, Chad and I have discussed, is there some grant funding that we might be able to take a look at? Maybe something else that popped up. We talked about Elgrip, maybe coming through in the next couple of years. So any grant funding that comes up in the next couple of years will ease some of the $6 million to help with hopefully some of the other projects. Also, the consultant had mentioned for our downtown project that we received the grant money on North Water Street, but he's going to go ahead and submit for the Pearl Street. Now that would be a huge revenue stream if we also received that money. So it's a continuous look at our needs and priorities as a city, and then determine as you get closer, what are we looking at, and what are we going to push those dollars into. So I just wanted to kind of go through this. I know Todd talked about it in passing when he presented about our debt capacity. And I just wanted you to see that in a bigger screen. And so you could kind of understand, because he said, well, your debt capacity is, 4.9, but you can think about bonding 6 million. You're like, how does that work? Because we only have 4.9. What happens actually is you pay money off as you go. Each year you pay money down on your principal. So then that allows you more money to debt in the future. Another thing that allows you a higher capacity is from 2018 to 2019, we saw the value within the city increase. The equalized value went up from 19 million to $20 million. And remember, when you decide what this number is supposed to look like, it's 5% of equalized value. So if you see building within your city and you start to see your equalized value goes up, then your capacity goes up also for debt. So this number gets bigger, and then it allows all of this to get bigger. Does that make sense? So this was a nice increase that we saw. My understanding when I talked to our assessor's name, Adam, we're going to see this same increase again this year, which will be very nice going into all of this COVID and uncertainty into next year. So I was really glad to hear that we might see this kind of increase again going into 2020 with some of the building projects that are being completed during 2019, because you're always a year behind when it comes to these values. That makes sense to everyone?
Now, Judy, with not looking at bonding, but looking at our overall budget coming up, is there any, first, we don't know anything yet, if the state shared revenue will be going down. If that does, well, then we're going to be spending more of our own money from our tax receipts, et cetera.
Correct. So that is a big uncertainty right now. I'm with you on that one. Next year, so the league, I always read the information coming through the league and try to keep a heartbeat on what the state is thinking about those revenues coming in. And what the league has said is so far, those shared revenues are promised for next year. Now, I'm not going to say, right? I'm not going to say that they're not going to, they have to have, it has to go through both the House. There's a big process for them to change those dollar amounts, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
We've seen other things happen, and yes, I'm a little bit nervous that going into next year already, we could see a reduction in those shared revenues. Then what happens is that puts bigger pressure on the budget that I present every year, because the first thing we cover is operational expenses. And what my budget message this year to everyone was, we can't have any increase in operational expenses this year. When it comes to operational expenses, we're gonna hold them steady.
Mhm.
So if you increase, you have to find somewhere else to decrease. Because as a city, if we see this operational increase, then you have your capital budget. So these are my two big ones, my operational and my capital. This one increases, guess what happens to capital?
Yep.
And we need money in our capital budget. So as a city, we got to figure out how are we going to hold this steady? And one of the big ones is health insurance. So my message is don't budget more than you budgeted in health insurance for 2019, because somehow, some way, we're going to keep that dollar steady. So I don't know if I'm going to have to make plan design changes. I don't know if we're not going to, put as much in HSA. I don't know if upfront you're going to give another 1% or 2% to paying for those, but somehow we're going to hold those steady. And we're going to do it as a group. I'm not going to do this myself. I always ask for input from department heads. I always ask for input from anyone who you asked me to go out to bid and look at the counties association. I sent you an email. We are looking at the counties association. Don't do anything in a vacuum. So I ask people, you have any suggestions? What do you think is, going to work best for the employees, your employees? We don't want to just take 1% because we take 4% up front. I don't want to just hike that to 10. We have people that if you go from 4 to 10%, you're taking their take home pay for the last 3 years away from them. So how can we make sense out of this and maybe do a 1% or on one end and then take away some of the health insurance incentive on the other and then look at plan design change. So all three maybe as a package. So, well, this is a strong 0%. There's been times where it's 0% and then I see, and then we know what happened to the ambulance subsidy. There's $32,000. I'm hoping that we're going to see a little bit of savings in our insurance area because, as you know, maybe some of our insurance companies are saying rates are going to drop next year because people weren't traveling, they had less accidents, there's all kinds of things going on. I'm kind of hoping we'll see. I'm not put a baking any money on that when it comes to the insurance industry, but I guess we'll see when those numbers come in. But over the next month, I will be getting lots of information about what my budget's going to look like for next year. And then I start to think through what's dropped, what went up. I've been doing that with wages, with fringes. Nancy puts together some spreadsheets for me. I say, put this much in, put that much in. I put it all together on my desk, what's increasing, what's decreasing. And I'm trying to think through that process over at the last 2 months. Or how are we going to make this work? Because of that very reason. So shared revenue goes down, you're going to see your capital go down.
Judy, when you talk about the insurance, is that an immediate increase, decrease from the previous year? Do you find that comes like this year, people are using it less because of what you said about less travel and whatnot? Would we see that decrease coming in 2021 budget, or would that be a 2022 budget that you're looking at for that?
Health insurance is going up 15%.
Sure.
I'm telling you, what I was talking about in a decrease is property insurance.
Okay.
Vehicle insurance.
Yep.
That's where I'm hoping that we see a decrease, because right now I'm looking at 16% for health insurance.
And you expect to see that this year yet for next year's budget?
2021, 16%. I already talked to our consultant, Jay and myself, met with her and Joe Moss. And we can't, this has got to be 8 at the very top, 5 to 8. And then inside, we will do the rest of the percentage to come down to 0. So plan design change is what they're looking at on their end, and the rest will come within the city agency. More, an increase to the percentage people are paying. Things like that. So that's a big one. I'm hoping on the, liability insurance side, the property insurance side, maybe seeing a decrease. But again, I'm not really holding my breath on that, because even though we think things are going to drop with COVID, I thought health insurance was going to drop. But a lot of these, I believe a lot of these organizations don't have the kind of revenue, and they can't afford to drop their.
Well, in looking at, like, when Chad and I did the ambulance stuff, it seems like the less these places are using, their costs are going up for the fact that they're still trying to pay their bills as well. So their costs are going up to cover their cost.
Yep.
So, I mean, expect a decrease, I don't know if that's a proper way to look at that.
No, I don't know that that's reality.
Right.
Judy, I would think maybe liability premiums go down, but property, I doubt it because of all
All the storms.
the storms.
Yep. And we know that. We've been in that boat way
Very
too
well
many
about
times.
that.
So this is kind of a 101 of city debt capacity. And this is really important when you're looking at projects, equipment, and all of those things in bonding. Because the last thing we want to do is strap the city so much that we have no capacity whatsoever. That's not a good place. So you never want to leave your city with so much debt that the next person can't breathe. So I work here another 10 years and I get the city in so much debt that the next person that comes in goes, boy, thanks, Judy. Now we can't even breathe or do anything for years. And a lot of people that happens to. You get a finance director who comes in and goes, okay, they just spent every cent that the city, right? We know that for a fact. So we're also going to be pretty conservative about making sure, and Phil knows this, when we take a look at debting, we want to take a look at consistent debting. We want to look at debting today, 4 years from now, 3 years from now, because again, we know that we have streets that we need to take care of, the infrastructure to take care of, and it doesn't end today or 3 years from now. It's a continuous process of trying to find the dollars to fund that. And this is unfortunately the only way we can do that today. It's the only way we can raise taxes. It's the only way that we can increase our tax levy. It's through debt.
So our max bonding is 2.4 million to be comfortable.
2.5 million is what we're looking at for the one coming up. We currently could bond at almost 5 million.
Oh, okay.
At 5 million.
Okay, I see.
But
And that-
knowing what we have coming in the future,
That 2.5 is for the projects that we have set forth in the future. Okay.
correct.
Does that include the Water Street one? Or the,
Downtown,
yeah,
this one, 2.5? No. We're not bonding for that one until 2024.
That's the 2.4 on top.
that's the next one. Oh, okay.
6 million we're looking at in 2024, 5 to 6 million. Just to cover the road projects, Oshkosh Street, downtown. So we will be looking for grant money as a savior. And the consultants actually seem to think, they seem to think that they were, that they may be able to get one. I don't want to put any words in their mouth, but they're going to go and try to get Pearl Street.
So it's gonna look better if we've already started the design work and everything. For Pearl Street, we apply. That's just more points to say, hey, we've already been farther in the design, farther in the planning.
That would be huge.
So the 2.5 then is for,
2.5, we would be looking at Warner Allen.
oh boy, that needs it.
Warner Allen. 6 buildings that get, at least 6 buildings with roofs. City Hall, Police Department, Library, and the other ones are.
I don't need to know exactly what buildings, I'm just curious.
There's sections of buildings too. So a number of roof of the library. But yeah, a lot of roof projects that need to be replaced because Chad actually had a consultant come in and look at those and schedule those. So I know he's very concerned about making sure that we matched up with that schedule,
Fire truck,
probably.
maybe. But that had the money for the Blackburn trailer or whatever.
Correct.
We got all that money.
Correct.
Okay.
That would be not even smart if we didn't fund.
No,
that.
you're right.
At
I
$1
want to
million.
make sure I know
Yeah.
where,
So
what,
that's about 450,000.
Yeah.
For that project, but they gave us almost $1 million.
Yeah.
So that's another thing is anytime we get grants or matches, we really try to bend over backwards to try to make those.
and I agree. I just, and you don't want to
Yeah.
be all the way in debt and you can't do stuff like that.
And-
That'd be,
Yep, and at this point, this is food for thought. You guys definitely have the final say in what those projects look like. We just have to know what they are going into bonding. They have to be listed. Because we're going to do, it sounds like bonds instead of notes. And those have to be a little bit more specific. So like I said, I'll meet with the fire chief tomorrow. We're going to talk about, his truck purchases and what those are going to look like, or what his needs are, whether he can push some of those off to 2024 will be my question. But we don't want to push too much to 2024 because we already know we have some big projects coming in 2020. We're going to be a busy city in 2024. So Oshkosh Street definitely on that radar too. So
Can I ask a question?
you can.
Does Werner Allen include any storm sewer work, or is it just street reconstruction?
I'll have to look, but I think there was some allowance in there for curb gutter and storm sewer, if I'm not mistaken. But Mike, I can look at that and get back to you.
Thank you.
It was 1.35 million for Warner Allen. Yes, Tom.
If we bond, how much time do we have to get these projects done? I think is what I'm trying to ask.
2 years.
Money has to be spent.
Mhm.
on the
Unless there are extenuating circumstances like we had with that outlet that Chad was talking about earlier. I did talk to Chad and he said, they're not going to come in there and fine you because you can't get your project done because the water's high. So there are extenuating circumstances that they're going to look at. I just had to also set it up as a payable. So bonding isn't actually sitting in my books as an open bond or open, money sitting there. So it depends on how you present it in your financial statements too. So I go back to the people, the auditors and the Phil and ask them, how should I present this? And what should we do if we can't get the project done? I'm always talking to them about that and how can we move forward.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yep. So that was, this is one of my main points here is that even though we only have 2.5 million after we would take out the 2.5, talking about a $6 million bonding down the road is still feasible because you're paying money off. Plus you can see that if our assessed value goes up, you're going to have more capacity there. So if somebody says, how can you be looking at a $6 million bond and you only have $2.4 million left? Because you're paying money through time. So paying $300,000 a year, which is opening up more capacity. Plus, hopefully we'll continue to see growth within the city. You see growth and the amount of money that you're allowed to borrow goes up.
What you're saying is you got more money to pay back.
Yes.
And we have more income.
So I wouldn't erase this, but there's something on the other side. I'd flip it, but something on there. I don't want to write on. All right.
Yep.
Now we're going to get a little bit more specific with the downtown project and Tif districts and funding them and difference between a Tif district and just putting infrastructure in. How did that? So one of the things I kept talking about is if you have a development downtown, that developer is going to ask the city for money. It's commonplace. But 20% was, when I saw that number, I thought, wow. Because there were days where developers came in and they didn't charge you at all. And they came in and put in a development. Things have really changed in the development area. So what I put together is you have two avenues you can take looking at that downtown, all right, as a council. Yep. So let's talk about the Riverfront property. So what the purpose of a TIF district or TID district, some people call it TIF or TID, TIF or TID district is you take a blighted area undeveloped, and you develop it. And the purpose of that is so that, okay, so you have the downtown development, and this is what it looks like today, and it's worth $0. Let's just say that for simplicity's sake, okay? So then you build on it and you put houses or you put libraries or you put whatever you put downtown. And pretty soon it's worth $1 million. Okay. So now we have $1 million development, and we have this in a TIF district or TID district. Okay, so the downtown, there it is. First we have just land, and all of a sudden we have this beautiful $1 million value sitting within that TID district. Okay, so if you have a $1 million, I'm going to step back a little bit. So in our tax levy, we have four jurisdictions. So we have 2 counties, we have us, we have the school district. So if you ever took a look at a tax bill, and I had a copy of it, the city is not the only player within your tax bill. So you have your school district, you have Fox Valley Technical College, you have the 2 counties, and then ourselves. So I guess there's actually 5 if you count the 2 counties separate. And then should I wait till he comes back? Okay. So if you add all of them up, we're at about 25 bucks. Okay. So you're sitting in the city of New London and you get your tax bill, you're going to pay about 25 bucks. Okay. That's what's going to sit on there. So every $1 million in value brings in $25,000 into this TIF district. Okay, that's revenue into the TIF district. You have to set up a TIF district for this to happen. Now, what you do with this money is up to you. But you got this value in here. So usually what you have is debt because you gave a developer 20% of this development to put this development in. So now you get $25,000 in increment to pay for what you gave the developer. Okay. And this is all fine and dandy, except if you don't have enough enough infrastructure, enough cost within here. So if this is only $1 million and you're only getting $25,000, but your debt is $50,000, it really doesn't make a lot of sense to go ahead and put this development in because you're never going to get your money back unless that's your purpose. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to debt and we're going to know that we're not going to get all our money back. If that's your purpose, that's fine. But you got to know that ahead of time. And the way to know that is how much money is going to be going in here. You got to have a developer who's going to tell you that. I can put X amount of dollars in that downtown. I can put X amount of dollars in here and this is what it's going to look like. Okay. Then you build your TID district around that. Or you calculate it. We can calculate how much money is this TID going to make us? Well, does it make a sense to give them 20% of their development in the downtown? So this is what it looks like as a TID district. The other option is to have somebody just build there. Okay, taxpayers or okay, whoever, you want to build a house downtown? Here's a piece of land. You go ahead and you build it. What happens then is, let's say they build a house for $20,000 or $250,000. We get $9 because that's what the city gets. Okay. So instead of $250,000, you would get $9,000 in this case and that's an increase in taxes to the city. So if you did nothing with this $9,000, it would drop your tax rate. If you use the $9,000 to pay for infrastructure, you would just increase your tax rate and you would absorb it in there. So that's the difference between a TIF district and just putting, homes up there and giving away the land and saying, we just want to develop, or you want to give it to a developer and say, put condos there. What you're going to get out of it is $9 versus $25. And then you're not going to have the mechanism to be able to pay a developer 20%. Does that make sense? Our portion, the city portion, is $9. TIF district, you have to get the counties to sign off. You have to get the school district to sign off. You have to get Fox Valley Tech to sign off. But 9 times out of 10, when you have a blighted district worth not a cent, they're going to sign off. Because in 27 years, which is the maximum amount of years you can keep that TIF district open, $36 million is what we closed our TIF to. $36 million was the value. So the school's going to see more money. The Fox Valley Tech's going to see more money when this is closed. They have to have a, down the road type, but you're not getting a cent the way it is today. Why wouldn't it make any sense for you to sign that paperwork and say, yep, build her up? it's a mechanism to also pay for what happens in here. And to say, okay, developer, we'll give you your $1.2 million, but we gotta make sure the value you're gonna put in there is gonna pay us our $1.2 million back. We're not taking money out of our coffers to pay for this, but we will develop a TIF district. We'll pay for that TIF district because we have to. Developer cannot put in a TIF district, it has to be the governmental unit. We're gonna put that TIF district in, and we're gonna expect you to put X amount of dollars. You tell us what you can do, and we'll tell you if it's gonna work. Because what happened is that you see this increase in value, that infrastructure increase in value, you have certain things that are fixed cost, and you have certain things that aren't gonna change. So you have the water lines or whatever for $500,000 that are going in down there that are fixed, no matter what the value is in with here, that's not gonna go up. So the higher the value, the more money you would have to pay that person that wants to put that money or that value on that parcel. Two different ways to look at it and two different ways the city should consider. This is straight, not, you wouldn't have any money out of your pocket if you say to, find a developer and say, there's the land, you go ahead and develop it. I would suggest a contract with them to say X amount of this or that is gonna go up over time would make sense. But then the city is not out any dollars at all. The other mechanism is to go ahead with a TID district, have somebody come in, take a look at that area, this is what I can do for you. Phil and I run the numbers and say, you know what, it'll pay for itself. The city won't be out any dollars out of its general fund. The TIF district will pay for it, the increment will pay for it. And that's how you're gonna pay your developer. Yes, Tom.
In those other units of government, they don't lose anything if it don't work. It's our loss.
You are correct. Yep, that's what they sign off for too. Because today they don't care that thing's not worth a cent. And they don't care if we lose everything, that's not gonna be on them. It's all on us.
All enough.
Yes.
And a couple of points there. The 1 million that Judy shows up top there, unfortunately, that's the money we gotta borrow up front.
Not necessarily. So if they're asking for 20%, we'd be looking at $200,000. So we would plus,
But
Yeah.
the interest too.
so if they're gonna put, yes, plus the interest, plus the TID district, because that's gonna all cost money. There's all fees involved in that. So if they're gonna build $1 million in here, they're gonna ask you 20 to 25%, $200,000 up front. So that's what you'd have to bond for. But it's not just 200,000, it's 200,000. And then debting can only go 20 years. This goes 27. So you have to make sure it's gonna pay you back over the 20 years that you take out the money for. So that's why you always wanna go back and have your financial person constantly running the, numbers as you're coming up with scenarios of what should we do and what would this look like? And again, as this dollar amount increases, the more you can pay for what's going on in here and or even come out profitable on this end. But you have to run the numbers and you have to make sure you have a solid person you're looking at to be doing infrastructure for you. You want to make sure those developers are solid. Do your research. Make sure you're not just getting, somebody who is not familiar with how to develop an area.
Am I assuming something, Judy, or not? After looking at all these numbers, is the message basically that the city can afford to give X amount of dollars for the development, the library development, as people call it, or is there a different figure?
With the library development,
Well, the Riverfront Property and library, same thing.
yep. So you almost have to have, what is it gonna look like first?
Yes.
You have to know, okay, so we're gonna develop phase one, and this is what it's gonna look like, and this is how much it's gonna cost, and phase two, or you decide you're just gonna, develop phase two and we're gonna sell lots. You have to kind of decide where are we gonna go with the downtown and what is it gonna look like? So until you know what the infrastructure costs are gonna, or what they're gonna build and how much value that's gonna mean to us as a TID district, then that's where everything's calculations start and saying, yep, that's gonna work. Nope, that's not gonna work.
Right.
So until you actually know what direction you're headed in, and then you have a player in that game. So if you have people who wanna build, so let's, what if you wanna sell lots? I'm just gonna sell, no, I'm not gonna sell lots. I'm gonna give away, I want everybody to have a half an acre. I'm gonna give away a half an acre, and I'm gonna have that homeowner build at least a $250,000 home. It's gonna be of natural color. It's gonna be this, that, and the other. What does that mean for tax revenue? So, if you get somebody in here who wants to build a house, or if that's the direction you wanna go in, that's all fine. We can still run numbers on that. What is that gonna look like for the city? So you have all kinds of options about what you wanna do with that. But that's not a TID district. So if you're gonna have a developer come in and build condos, then that's on them. But if you wanna try to fund something and help a developer pay for the downtown, suggestion would be that a TID district is your way. A great mechanism to be able to pay back the bonding that you would pay for that developer. But then you wanna make sure you get the value in there to pay for it.
But the TID cannot pay for the library.
That is correct.
The library would have to come out of the bonding that you just talked about before.
I think,
I don't think
The
that's
same
anything
question.
you guys haven't heard before, that the TID district can't pay for the library.
I think it's the same question. So you have to have a tax producing entity to pay back money.
Correct, you need value.
You need value that produces tax.
Yes. Mhm.
That's, okay.
And 27, years down the road, you have to be a forward thinker. It could be a great opportunity for the city to do, what did we do when we closed our TID district? The city garage without even raising taxes. It was $5 million bond we took out that year. We put in the boat launch downtown. There was a list of this along the streets and things that we did with that, and not an increase in taxes that year. So it can be a great mechanism to work with your other bonding as you're a finance director looking at things, say, this year I'm gonna bond. Oh, and then my TIF is closing. I can take a break from bonding. So it's another way to look at funding the city for the future. Anytime you can get value, assess value within your city, have people moving in and building, that's all a win for everything. Restaurants, businesses, libraries, everybody, that's a win when people are moving in. And I think there's a great need in New London right now for housing and things of that nature. That's what the study's saying, that we have, we have businesses looking for people to put their head down, and they're looking for employees. And so, but you guys have to kind of decide where you're gonna go with that and what that's gonna look like. And you need players in that game too. So then I'm gonna leave up to you. where those people come from and how that's gonna look. Yeah, it's just some options. Because it doesn't make, either way, it's gonna be revenue into the city. TID district, like Tom said, more of a gamble. Is it gonna meet fruition? Is it gonna pay its bills? That's, keeps people up at night sometimes. Is my TIF district gonna pay for itself? I'm very nervous about that. But it's the legal aspects you gotta look at of that development to think through that. Or do we just wanna have somebody come in and build $250,000 homes on there, condos on there? Let some other developer come in and say, I'd like to see some condos. How about you come in and you take it? We'll just give you the land and develop it. And then we're out. And then we get to see the tax revenue on the other side.
Judy,
One more.
hello?
I guess.
Yes, go ahead.
The
So
su-
who's gonna decide like the different options that we would see with this? Like you just mentioned that we have several different ways we can do this, or is
You
that
guys,
is that the city administrator's job, or, I mean,
well, I think you also have Todd Hutchinson, who can be a big help in this. I think that's why you guys are, looking to him to kind of help you through options. And I think he's also looking to you to what options do you want me to explore? So I think that you and Todd, as a committee and Todd need to work together. So if you give him some ideas, this doesn't have to, be a perfect idea. Nothing's a dumb idea. And then Todd will kind of research that or say yes or no. But I believe that's why you kind of have him on board so you guys can brainstorm about what you're thinking about, and he can do some, think thought process as a developer of does that make sense or doesn't make sense to develop downtown.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Tom?
The sooner we can get,
Todd,
and
is Todd trying to talk? I'm sorry, Tom. I thought I heard somebody trying to talk.
the sooner we can increment coming in, the sooner we can pay that back.
Correct. So that's important.
It can
too.
be money left over at the end. It's a
Well, that-
gamble.
Well, then if it closes early, that's always a positive. So you have this debt and you have other expenses, but once it's paid off, you can close it. You don't have to leave it open 27 years. I wouldn't guarantee you're not gonna, I wouldn't guarantee ever that it's gonna close
Never.
early. That's not, but you don't have to keep it open. So if the development is greater or bigger or larger than anticipated, you definitely can close it as soon as those expenses are paid off. What you usually end up doing is you'll pay for something else within the area, like a street. So you can pay for streets that service that area. If you get a really nice amount of money coming in with your Tif district, what you'll do then is you'll encompass more area because you get like a 5-mile radius. And I can guarantee you if something like that worked, you would start looking at streets, anything that services that area. And you would start helping the capital side of the equation out by pushing it into that Tif district. I would. We did it out at the industrial park. We put in roads after the fact because they allowed us expenditures to pay for that because it was a good Tif district for the city.
Judy,
Yes.
could you also talk about the difference between a city-funded TID and a PAYGO TID, and then also a project-specific TID rather than an area TID?
So the pay-go TID would mean that the developer would want $200,000 out of this project. So instead of taking out $200,000 in debt, what you would do is you would say, okay, we're going to get $25,000 a year from our increment or whatever that dollar amount looks like, and we will pay you over time. So you are not going to get your $200,000 up front. We're going to pay you $20,000 a year for 5 years. And then for 10 years, actually it would be, but for 10 years, and then that's your incentive instead of upfront. I'm not sure how many people are going to go with that pay-go system anymore, or how that would look like in today's environment, but it's certainly an option.
That's from my experience, that's what I see happening more and more now, because it takes the risk off the municipality and it puts the risk on the developer. So the developer says, or comes in and claims, I'm going to do this $1 million project and it's going to generate $25,000 of taxes. And as a city, you have to rely on that and say, yeah, okay, I think it will. Well, then if the developer was overly rosy in his projections and doesn't actually come up with that, then there aren't the funds available to pay the city back for the money that they borrowed. In the PAYGO situation, the developer takes on that risk and says, okay, I'm saying it's going to be 25,000 coming in. I'm going to go get a loan for myself up front, and the bank is going to give me a loan based on this stream of income. And then if it doesn't, the income doesn't actually come in that way, I'm actually on the hook for the difference because I have personal guarantees against that. So the only downside to the PAYGOs, or there's two downsides. One is that developers have to pay a higher interest rate on the money that they borrow than a municipality is going to have to. So that's one downside. So the money doesn't go as far. The second downside with that is that no, I lost my train of thought there. I'm sorry. So one of the downsides is that the money just doesn't go as far with the pay. Oh, the second downside is that there is a cost, and Judy mentioned this earlier, that there's a cost to setting up these TIFs. And so it doesn't really work very well for smaller projects because you have, I don't know, $50,000 worth of expense to set up a TIF, whether it's a $1 million TIF or a $20 million TIF. It's the same amount of cost to set it up. So sometimes the smaller projects don't work as well.
Go ahead, Tom.
If the revenue isn't there from the TIF, does that mean that the general fund would have to pay it?
You are correct.
Huh?
Yes, it's a city obligation of taxpayers.
Yeah.
Yes, it's general obligation
Yes.
debt.
You bet.
You bet. It's a big risk.
Any other questions?
So that's all I have, guys.
Thank you, Judy. As of right now, anybody else have any questions or comments for the floor?
Thank you, Judy.
You're welcome.
Ann, would you like to explain anything where you're sitting at with the library project, or thoughts or ideas at this time?
Not at this time, no.
Chad, you have anything?
Todd, you mentioned last time, you kind of were spurring the question about, what do you guys want to see there? I mean, the site's been open for how many years, 13, 15 years. I mean, there's been other developers that have come and gone, for a free type of application. You mentioned at the time, is it time for the city to kind of think about what, instead of just having a developer pop up and do something, is it time for the city to spur what we want to see there and then search out a developer to fulfill those goals? I guess we got to figure out what we want to see there.
Yeah, I think that that's one thing that's helpful for developers to understand what it is, and from sort of a minimum and a maximum of what it is that you're looking for on the site. What it is you absolutely will not accept is helpful to know, and then also what your ideal is, right? So somewhere in there, I do think you have to also allow in for some flexibility for what the market actually is willing to deliver, right? I mean, you can want certain things, but if the market isn't willing to deliver that, and the developers and the private sector understands that better than anybody else, you have to be able to be flexible enough to handle that. But the other part of that I talked about, and this kind of gets back to Mike Pinch's question earlier, was in regards to the TIF, one thing that would be helpful is to set sort of the parameters of what you would be willing to accept in a TIF. And I mentioned in one of the other meetings that I know, I live in the city of Oshkosh, and I know that they went through this. They looked at other communities and what their TIF policy was, and they actually developed a policy where they would say, okay, and I'm just throwing numbers out here, so I don't know the exact numbers that they said, but they might say, we will lend out up to 80% of the increment. So if the increment was, like Judy was saying, was $25,000, they're not going to give out 100% of that. They're only willing to give out 80%, 75, 90%. They all have different numbers. And then they will also say, so that's the maximum that we're willing to give out. And then they'll also outline that, the maximum term that they're willing to do it. Is it 15 years? Is it 20? Are they willing to go out to 25? Whatever the maximum amount is that they're willing to give that out at. Also, if they're actually going to be doing the lending, if it's not going to be a pay-go, what's the interest rates that it's going to cost, so that a developer can figure out, okay, the increment is $20,000 that I'm going to get, but now the interest cost on that is going to be X. And there's also going to be, and some of these municipalities will also have an administrative fee on top of that. So they'll subtract out an administrative fee annually. So I think that would be helpful if the community took a look at what other communities were doing, because essentially in certain ways you're competing against these other communities. See what they're doing with their TIF policies, and then formulate a policy so that it's a lot quicker and easier to let a developer know, you want to come in? We're willing. Another thing that we talked about was we're willing to go up to 20%, say, as an example of the total development cost, but the developer has to be able to match that with their own equity, and maybe there's some other parameters in there. They have to have a 1.2 debt coverage ratio, things like that. So those all in a policy guideline for how you're willing to give up money would be helpful.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, I'm going to call Phil and see if we can get a hold of some of those. I bet you he's got access to a lot of those.
Sure.
I mean, it makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. I get it.
I think it'd be very helpful if we could had actual examples from
Yep.
other cities.
Yep,
what they
I can
look
get
like.
you
Right.
some examples of those, I bet you.
Do we have an idea? I mean, it comes back to us knowing what we want to do with that property. How do we want to move forward with developing? I think that's where we need to start. We have a lot of ideas out there, but we don't have no ideas what we're doing. With the housing study, I mean, what are we looking at? Our thoughts for that. There's been some proposals out there as far as
Pay to get rid of it.
multifamily homes, single family homes, condos. What are your guys' thoughts?
Well, Todd, were you going to comment on that at your final meeting or whatever? The housing studies that have been done? And what it looks like we could attract in London?
Yeah, I can have a report on the two housing studies that have been completed and sort of summarize those two at that time. But I think, one of the things that we talked about at the previous meeting is that the housing studies are great. They give you a snapshot of sort of the history of what's happened, and potentially population growth that they're projecting based on the history. But one of the things that we also talked about is that sometimes you create your own market, right? Even if there's not a market someplace, I mean, we all know of places that you look at it and you're amazed that it ever got developed, right? And it was because somebody came in and had a vision for that and drove the market through marketing, through outreach, through a lot of different things, through bringing a community together, through just hard work, right? You're able to create something that everybody didn't think was possible, and that the market studies that maybe were developed never would have predicted. So I think that we can't rely 100% on those market studies, but yes, I will give a sort of a summary of what those were at our final meeting.
Okay, back to Mark's question. So I see it. So part of that question, for example, is do we want to attract young workers, or are we happy with rich older people coming in? Comes to the issue of, for example, do we want townhouses there or affordable housing? So what's what's the preference of this committee or this council? One point in some of our earlier discussions, some of you remember, we had concerns, for example, about affordable housing going there. We said affordable housing can go up in a cornfield. We want to take advantage of the river. And Todd kind of alluded to that last time. We thought the river is a big attraction. And it's going to attract rich people, put up nice fancy houses on the river or whatever. And he pointed out, unfortunately, what they have to look at and all the other issues with that area, we haven't been able to attract those kinds of developers. And maybe our alternative is affordable housing, so forth. But that's kind of, as I understood Todd's discussion at the last meeting, is what we have to kind of decide here. Would we be okay with affordable housing going down there? Or do we want townhouses, something richer and so forth? Factories or commercial, for example. Does it have to be residential housing, that type of thing? Because once we make a decision, then we can try to attract developers and hopefully get something built down there. We have to change the zoning or whatever to make sure that we can have affordable housing or whatever, or real commercial real estate. And so I think that's what Todd was asking us, is we have to kind of come up with a vision of what do we want down there? What do we see going down there? What's our goal? So for example, if we want to attract young workers, we have a lot of businesses in town that are hurting for workers. I was at a commercial meeting, I mentioned this at a previous meeting, like Tyson, for example, they were talking about being down 100 workers. And so we're not, from an economic development standpoint, we're not going to attract businesses to New London if they don't have workers to hire. And so maybe our goal for that property is to attract young workers. We put up housing down there that young workers can afford to either rent or live in or whatever. And what they cannot afford is big, expensive townhouses. So that's what we have to kind of decide, or as I understood Todd's discussion, that's what we kind of have to decide as a council, is what is the vision for that property?
I have a question. When we speak of affordable housing, what's everybody's thoughts on affordable housing? When you image that in your head, I feel that word affordable housing is garbage bags sitting outside and broken bicycles. And I mean, that's not my envision, but I think that's what our public's envision is. What kind of image are we trying to cast with that wording?
Because the Beacon Street cottages are affordable housing.
Yeah.
And they're pretty nice looking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not section 8 where somebody gets a voucher and they move up here from Milwaukee.
So that when we talk in the public as far as affordable housing, like I said, that first image in their head is that exactly.
Affordable housing is somebody that makes 50, 60 grand a year. You know, it's probably above the average income of somebody in New London today.
But then on the other side of the coin, whether it's affordable housing or condos, apartments or whatever, the other two riverfront developments with condos are basically sold out. So let's look at history a little bit. That worked. Condos worked in those areas.
Who do we have in them condos? What kind of people?
I have no idea. But now getting to this riverfront property, it's a different animal because nobody has any frontage because of the Berniger Trail.
Yeah.
So this is a little different animal. I'm sure they have river access, but
You're gonna have a hard time selling a condo down there.
Yeah.
With that trail in your.
Then you just down there a little bit, you have right across the river here, that apartment complex. There's a waiting list to get in there.
over here.
Yeah.
Shadow Street. I mean, Wolf River Ave.
Wolf River Ave.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So I'm thinking over there, like Dave mentioned, the young workers apartments.
Kind of like the Beacon Street
Could be
development.
like that, or maybe a 2 or 3 story, who knows? But I guess we gotta come to a conclusion, or this thing just go on and on and on.
Right.
We're gonna do anything.
That's where we're at right now,
The
buddy.
thing that screwed us up is when, what's his name, got ill and couldn't follow through.
Yeah, well, I didn't think
It
we
was a
came,
combination of what, apartments, townhouses,
We have commercial opportunities.
yes.
Do we
Something
know the
commercial?
makeup of the people that are renting at Beacon Street? Is it retired individuals? Is it working families? I mean,
I
that's-
think it's a
that's
very
great example.
good mix. I mean, I've driven down there, and just, I've kind of in that area, just watched what kind of people are around there. And I think there's a pretty good mix of
Chad, you mean
people.
over on Wolford Avenue by the.
Nope,
right
the-
No,
here?
the Beacon Street,
Cottage.
Huh?
the Beacon Street.
You mean the cottages, or?
Yes.
by the old
I thought you meant
Simmons.
over here.
You know,
We were
it's a-
talking about both.
Oh, yeah, because over here it's pretty mixed.
Yes.
And, I've been down by Hilker's a couple times, and yeah, I think it's probably pretty well mixed there too.
It is. I've drove by numerous times
Yeah.
in Memorial Park.
Yeah.
See young and old and little kids, and
Yeah.
then you see just about everybody walking down the street and stuff.
Same with that development out by Quick Trip out here. Boy, the mix of people that are out there is insane. I mean, kids running around to the retired community. So, and we talked about 3 different kinds right now. So there's what do you want to see on our riverfront?
I know when the library fundraising was going on, you had a lot of feedback. What was, people were really interested in one particular part of that project? What,
People were interested in all the housing.
in any of
We
the
had
housing?
seniors that wanted to build the library. We also had people interested in buying the condos
Condos?
or the
Yeah.
townhouses. The project that Brandy had put together was,
Mixture of
people
all of it.
came to the library, but they wanted something to happen on that property. I mean, that's what they were buying.
So condos of, I mean, you don't have to make the whole piece of property one particular thing.
I was gonna say, there's fourplexes too. You don't have to go big or go home in the size of what you're building. You don't have to go with the 2 stories there. One side of them apartments are 2 stories. The other side are single story. Like you said, a mix.
Just to play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
I was just to throw something out. So I was gonna say, let's make the whole thing a tiny houses subdivision. Just to put something out there, because we're gonna sit and talk. I mean,
Yep.
I don't know if tonight we were gonna come out of here with a list of 7 things we'd like to see there.
I'd
We were
like,
talking about funding tonight, but everybody's gotta, at some point, gonna have to do some homework
Yep.
and say, what are our young people asking for? What are our old people asking for? What are everybody, what are we want to see down there? And I don't think I came with a list like that tonight. I mean,
with the concept of looking at a younger percent or a younger group, the concept of a townhouse, our younger community, just listening, I mean, we all have kids and stuff. They do like the concept of townhouses. Do we have a community as far as businesses in our area that them youngsters, as I wanted to say, can afford a townhouse compared to a rental property? Because I know that's where, I know quite a few of them that take them avenues.
Well, the millennials, they like to point out all the stories about millennials. They love living downtown. I mean, they don't even have cars, a lot
Yep.
of these and so forth in the cities. And so if we could appeal to them somehow to move down there, and I don't know if they would live in that townhouse.
They don't like to cut grass either.
So why do they
Yeah.
want to live downtown? What amenities are they getting that sucks them into the downtown that they like?
That's what we have
People down there, then the amenities will come.
they want to be close to libraries, they want to be close to trails, they want to be close to recreation, and they want to be social. I mean, we had Dr. Karen Windmar here talking a couple of years ago about that. You can research a lot of what millennials are wanting. You know, they're healthier, but we also have the largest segment of our population are seniors. So no matter what, we're going to have a mix of people, but the companies are telling people like Dave Teal, April at the chamber, companies are saying workforce retention and recruitment is huge for them. So we got to look at attracting those folks too. They don't want yard work. They don't want to drive vehicles. The new norm by 2025 is not vehicle ownership. They don't want to deal with car insurance companies. They don't want to deal with spoof calls telling them their car warranty's about to expire. They're kind of a no BS generation. They're not going to fall for the same crap the rest of us have, you know. So you want to look at developments with very little upkeep, almost the same as your seniors. They downsize because they want condos because they don't want to. They've been picking up branches and mowing lawn their whole life. You know, they don't want that. They don't want to shovel in the winter time. Neither do millennials.
Right.
You're getting your kid to grab a shovel once.
Good point.
You know? But so you have to look at the trends of society when you start thinking about a multi-million-dollar development too.
And Chad, we just had that gentleman here that can pull all that kind of information together. Is that an option of trying to get a study done from him?
That Bill Zeiner, you brought up that information, what people want in this area. So that might be something to target. If we can talk to him and see, okay, what do millennials like? And then he brings down that data. There you go.
That'd be a good guy to use for.
If you are looking at any residential, remember Tom McHugh? He built those 10 houses back in behind Walmart area and sold all of them within 6 months, filled them all up. People, they look really nice. Just a real basic home, just something to think about as well.
Yeah, that was just recently.
Good point. Thank you, Mike.
I think that's not a bad idea though, to get Bill Zeiner and target, if that's the clientele you're looking at, what's going to attract that clientele? Todd, any comments on that? I mean, are we going the right direction? Are we going the wrong direction?
No, I think that makes sense. I mean, it sounds like you're kind of taking a look at, even though the market study says that you're an aging population and they're predicting more of that and then some population decline because, like it or not, the aging population is going to disappear at some point. So they're actually showing population decline, I think, from 2030 to 2040. So what you're saying is, how are we going to start attracting a younger population? So I think that makes sense. I think looking at that. And then on the flip side of that, I just heard somebody bring up McHugh. And I think that is an excellent idea. And it's one of the things that when we first started talking, is one of the things that I think is important is to get, whatever real estate company you want to get involved. But I think getting some real estate professionals involved in marketing the site and going out and talking to all kinds of developers, because developers have opportunities all over the place, right? And they're looking at stuff all over the place all the time. And it's who's ever, it's the squeaky wheel. It's who's ever tugging on their shirt sleeve the latest is what's getting interest, right? So if you're not out there talking to McHugh and to, I forget the name, there's some larger developer up in like Stevens Point that's doing some stuff in Wapaka right now, or some other places, and going out and reaching out to all those different real estate professionals that are doing apartments, condos, single family homes, commercial development, whatever it is, to see what somebody might all of a sudden be interested in. And then you can see whether or not it sort of matches and meshes with what your vision is. If somebody comes in and they're saying, I think another part of this is what you're willing to accept, right? Are you maybe you want a higher level of finishes on this site than you will accept out in the cornfield, like somebody mentioned. Okay, so maybe those are the things that you also have to kind of think about. Is when somebody comes in here and they say, I'm going to do exactly what I did out in this cornfield here. Are you okay with that? You can give them a quick yes or no answer. Nobody minds a no as long as it's a quick no. Nobody likes a no that gets drug on forever. And I think that that's one of the problems that's happened here over time, is that things kind of get strung out. So figuring out what you're willing to do for financing in kind of broad strokes, figuring out what you're looking for from sort of a market perspective and clientele perspective in broad strokes again. If somebody comes in with a really unique idea, it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that you already have in mind what you would like to see. Figuring out in broad strokes what you would like to see from a aesthetic perspective as well is helpful. So that if somebody says, well, I can put up a pole building here and do storage, well, that's probably a no. I don't know. But those are the types of things that you can say yes or no to real quick and move on. So I think those are all good things, but I really like and this is kind of how I came in here to begin with, but I really like the idea of going out and pounding the pavement and getting out some marketing information to a lot of other developers across the state to say, hey, this is what we got. Are you interested in what kind of package do you provide?
Is that something you would do for us, Todd?
Pardon?
Is that something you would do for us?
Yeah, maybe it's something that I have to think about, to think about how that would work. But yeah, I think that's initially what I was sort of initially proposing, was to go out and do that, to try and find those people to do that. But I think, and whether it's, initially is with Keller Williams, or maybe it's somebody local again, or somebody different. But I think that just getting that, hitting that out there while you're working on this other stuff, because all of a sudden there might be somebody out there that's doing it in Wapaka or Clintonville or someplace else. And it's like, hey, this just worked here. I can do this over in New London, so, and they have a proven concept that just works someplace else. And now they're just looking for another site. So I think it's helpful to keep putting that out there and have somebody that's, trying to push that. And the other thing is, I heard it touched on just briefly by somebody, was this whole thing also started with the library. And I think one of the big questions is do you want the library down there? And obviously one of the benefits of having the library down there is that it is an attraction, and I think that's why people were sort of excited about Randy's concept, was that it was something else to do down there, not just to live. So it was it generated a lot more activity as well, which is something that millennials like. And I think the active older generation also like to have activity going on around them. So the boomers are kind of like the millennials in some ways with that regard.
Mark, so that's one thing we never have done here, is market it. Since I've been on the council.
You haven't signed on it for
We will always, yeah, that was for sale time, but as far as, like Todd said, or Dave, solicit some real estate developers. Say, hey, what can you do for us? Rather than going out and paying another $80,000 to a guy like Randy. And we got one idea.
Yeah.
These developers. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the other thing is to keep an open mind to maybe smaller projects, right? I think I think what everybody wanted was somebody to come in, do the whole thing, one big project, one $30 million, project on the site, or 20 million, whatever it was. But a lot of times, the bulk of what actually gets done in America is in smaller businesses, smaller people doing smaller projects. And maybe it's breaking it up into some smaller pieces. Somebody mentioned, micro housing, which is big in some areas. And maybe a piece of it is that, or maybe, so I think obviously you got to be careful about not having some sort of a hodgepodge development. But if you think about the way that communities like New London developed over time, they didn't develop with one large project, right? They were subdivided into smaller lots, and they were done incrementally and sort of more organically over time. They developed and filled in. And so maybe that's an option for that site as well, to take a look at and consider. I mean, I guess I like to keep all the options open, keep them all out there, and really see what the market wants to do in terms of other developers that are out there, what they're willing to put their money behind to do.
I'd like to comment on what Pinch brought up about the Mr. McHugh development over there. I don't know how many houses he just built, but I know of 3 of them that were sold before he even had them built. And out of them 3, the age range was from 23 to 27 years old. I mean, they're both, all 3 of them were married or getting married, and having 1 kid or 2 kids. So
Yep.
That's a thought. I was, now that I'm just thinking about all that,
There's definitely not enough of those kind of houses, but I just recall Tom being here saying he didn't make anything on any of those. So how do you ask a developer to come and build a bunch of something that not going to make any money on?
He made money on the 10 that he did behind the Walmart. He made money at that. He sold those at 160,000 each. But he said when he did some work on Beacon and did some vacant lots and stuff where he had to buy the lots and that on single like houses, he was basically breaking even by the time he got done.
Like when he took down a house and put up a new one, he did that
Right.
one on.
Right, like by Mill Street, he did it. He did it in a couple spots. I think Quincy Street, and he said he basically was doing it for free by the time he was done. That's why he was asking for lots that we might donate at that point in time, that if we were to give him the lot, like a vacant lot in town, then he thought he could at least make a profit on it. But that's something that he would be more than willing to talk to somebody about again, I'm sure.
Perfect. So with that said, I think our next form on the agenda would be to discuss library options and financing. What is the library asking the city to finance, and how can we fit that in moving forward?
So like essentially take 4 orange cones. I'm going to simplify this. Take 4 orange cones, take it down to that development, the Riverfront Property, put the 4 orange cones on the amount of space needed if there was money to put up a library there. But then you have the whole other site that's tax generating property available for development. Or don't put the 4 orange cones there and look at that open lot. And I mean, there's two discussions here.
Yep.
So, I mean,
We kind of hashed out the one of without the library. Now we're going to talk about with the library.
but I mean, the library wouldn't take up that whole site
Nope,
either. But-
nope.
So there's 2 discussions, there's 2 decisions. So.
Right. And that's what I said. We kind of kicked around the ideas of what we wanted to do down there. And that was all without the library. Now we're going to have that same thought process with a library project there. Because if I stand corrected, the library is a cost to the city. And with moving forward, we have to put that cost into that budget of development. Which brings in our TIF, because the TIF can help pay for costs, Can't pay for the library. So that's an upfront cost for us. Anybody have any other suggestions on that? Any ideas, thoughts, questions?
After going through all this prior, how can anybody look at our numbers and think there's any chance we have even $2 million to put towards a library at this time when so many people are complaining about the roads? You know, I don't see anything there. Now we get that developed and say we leave a section to in the future put the library, then we would have the tax money coming off of that development. And we may be in a, 5-6 years down the road, we may be in a better situation. And I feel horrible for everybody that's worked on the library. I really do. But looking at these numbers, I don't see any feasible way of any tax dollars trying to put up a library at this time.
I'd like to ask the Library Commission, what are you asking from the city as a commitment for a dollar amount?
Well, the library committee's not here, the board's not here, but at the time that we had a development, we were asking for a very specific amount. Now that's all changed, so we don't really have a figure. I mean, there's no building, there's no plan, so it's difficult for us to ask for money. I mean, it's kind of like, how much is your TIF gonna bring in? There's no plan, there's no development, you don't know.
Right.
So at this time, we couldn't really say what we're asking for from the city.
Can I ask a question of Ann? I was just wondering, do you still have some funds that are donated that could still be used? And would you be anticipating more funds being able to be raised if you did ask for money?
We right now have commitments, yes, we have pledges. Most of those pledges came from people who doubted that any project would ever happen, so said they would give the money when the dirt turned. So we'd have to go back to we have to go back to our donors right now as it is, because everything's been on hold for 6-8 months, however many months it's been. But yes, we intended to still fundraise further. I think there's still money. I think there's still people that are interested. We just don't, at this point, there's no plan to talk to anybody about it.
And I know this might be taboo, but it should be asked at least. Obviously we got the capacity for the bonding. Where does referendum come and play with that capacity if a referendum was put out there to fund the library?
Yeah, so it counts against your general obligation debt.
It
So
does.
even if you requested a referendum, you would have to count that in the dollar amount up to your maximum.
Okay. So you can't still go above and beyond if it's a referendum. It still has to be in play
Correct.
with those numbers.
Yeah.
Got it.
So moving forward, you guys actually don't have any numbers to give to us to help plan?
Not at this point. We may in the near future, but we don't know.
Okay.
I mean, $5 million is a 22 or 20,000 square foot building. That's what our space needs that for. That's obviously flexible, but that's what the going rate for a 20,000 square foot library. That was with fixtures and furnishings, yeah.
When you put up that building, is there a requirement for parking?
That's city ordinance.
Because at one time I thought there was something said, when we first started this, that you had to have so many parking stalls.
Well, your city ordinance says per square foot, there's so many stalls, I believe. I don't know the ordinance.
Yeah, I don't know.
You guys wrote it. So I'm sure since we're a city building, you could probably give us a variance and you could take in street parking or something else. I don't know. And I don't know the ordinance. I know that when a developer, quite a while ago, the architect looked at it, it was like, I thought 80 stalls, but don't quote me on that. 20,000. I mean, Walmart has that. All these buildings have to have a certain amount of space, parking spaces. That's city ordinance. Or building permit.
So council, with that said, we got to move forward actively. Judy has presented her budget and has stressed that we should bond soon. We don't have any numbers from the library. Our next step, I think, would be to talk to, where were we? That Bill Zeinart, get that study and find out what we get from him and come back. And the other one would be McHugh. Find out what he has for ideas, invite him. And see if there's any other, in the meantime, developers that want to come back with an idea and kind of tell us where we can go and hammer next time, say this is the direction we want to go. And in the meantime, we have to figure out if we're going to, if we build the infrastructure, we can still go, or not the infrastructure, but the housing and stuff, we can still do TIF or the housing development, correct?
Absolutely. You can do a mixed on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. You can do a TIF and it's, for a specific purpose, and then you can do, a developer on another area. I think that was Todd was kind of alluding to that. Don't think that you have to do everything in one felt swoop. I think we were trying to do that and say, we want to do this and we want one developer and we need it done yesterday. And so I think Todd was kind of alluding to the fact that, yes, we could look at a number of different areas, industrial, commercial. Do we want apartments? Do we want housing? So
that's what I'm going to get to right now is we have two other entities out there. We have commercial and we have industrial. Are either one of them an upfront idea for this project?
No industrial.
I think retail, I mean, like I said, what's going to attract those kids, families?
Yeah,
Come there.
commercial, like office space or retail, professional office.
So definitely out with industrial, but we are retail.
I think that's on the table.
I think Todd's right. We got to market it, not just to your Tom McHughes. We love guys like him, but Todd mentioned the realtor and Stevens Point that's doing a big project in Wapaka, but the frustrating part of this whole conversation and this whole meeting for me today is this is exactly where we were at in April.
Yep.
When we kind of slapped Todd and his partner in the face in that Zoom meeting. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but that's the frustrating part for me here today. But I think some good things were aired out here, and Todd made some good points again tonight about marketing it. And are you going to call these developers or who's going to do it?
Who's gonna beat the bush with all those developers?
I think
'Cause
first,
you're right. It's more than just Tom. Tom might be a very good, somebody that should have a piece of the pie here. But there might be a dozen of us. I mean, you drive from Greenville to Oshkosh on 76 or 96, whatever it is now. You see all the development going up on the east side of the road. East side of there and so forth. Would any of those developers be willing to come to New London and put up housing, whatever? Somebody should be contacting them, like you say, beating the bush, getting out there and actually. Kent sent out like 176 letters or whatever it was. You remember that? But I think it takes more than that. It takes a phone call or something. Somebody really, if you just send I think a letter out, they just throw it in the waste paper basket unless they're really desperate for work. I think it's somebody that needs to really get out there and talk with these people and so forth. And I don't know who that person is that's going to beat the bush.
Did you have a question?
I think what Todd was saying before too, Judy was going to talk to Ellers and try to get that TIF policy procedure thing figured out. So those are the things to have that package ready to go.
Yep.
You know, so we talked to the Bill Zeinert and Judy can talk to Phil and
Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't want to put you in a hot spot. But I think back in April, when you had that economic development meeting, because I was also part of that, I was in that. Didn't you say that you would find or were suggesting that you could find somebody possibly to develop that, and you would only have only get paid if you developed it?
Yeah, that was the proposal at that time. Yeah. Just since I'm on the call right now, also the committee that I've been reporting to, also in the last meeting directed me to get back in touch with Grant Fisk, who had shown interest before. So I have made a contact with him last week. I emailed him the 2 market studies. He's going to review them and get back to me with what his level of interest is now again. So he's another person, but I don't know that it's just Grant or that it's just McHugh. I think that's a really great point about, you know, driving between New London and Appleton, New London and Oshkosh, and seeing who's out there and just making contact with them, because if they're doing it there in a smaller community, there's no reason why they shouldn't be doing it in New London. And I think that to have one thing that I've experienced as I've done developments in different communities, it's like a breath of fresh air when you have a community that welcomes you and wants you there, as opposed to somebody that's throwing up roadblocks all along the way. So being able to get into that mindset and being cohesive as a community, and that reaching out shows that you want them there, is helpful.
Are we going to use you as a resource to bring in some of them developers to discuss that?
Are you the chairman?
Todd,
Pardon?
are you going to, or do the reach out to them, that resources to bring them back? Basically what I'm asking, are you the one that's going to be doing a phone call? And I think that's what Judy was getting at.
Yeah, and I think we just have to revisit the, I had put together a proposal before on how I would do that, and so maybe we have to resurrect that and take another look at it and see if maybe now is the time for that. I know that initially everybody wanted to back off a little bit and just kind of take it one step at a time, and so that's what we've been doing. You know, we first did the research on Stadmuller, found out where that was at. Found out that it wasn't going to work, wasn't able to be resurrected. Now, next step was to talk to Grant. And so I'm in the process of doing that. And now if we want to, take a step beyond that, we can start looking at that as well. But yeah, I can kind of think about that, and we can have another discussion about that.
Thank you. Chad, go ahead.
Okay, my comment is, I think we should give Todd a chance to do something for us. And I also, we need to keep in mind, after listening to Judy, that we should do what is affordable on the site. Because I don't want to pay to get rid of it.
Right. Correct.
My comment.
Thank you.
I was always okay with Todd's first proposal. His section.
Yep.
should revisit that. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. I assume that was still part of the whole proposal.
Yeah. That'd be up to Todd, of course, but I
Mhm.
mean, that.
Mhm.
Perfect. Pay when you get 12 and get your percentage.
Chad, are you on board to contact Bill Zeinart and get that ball rolling?
Absolutely.
He's
I'll
hired
find
by
out
us.
what-
Yeah.
If we have specific things we want to find out, how do we do that? Do we pay him to do that or what? I'll have to find that out.
He's coming back next for economic development. He's coming back. So
But I'll get that information beforehand to kind of see. We're looking for specific data. How do we
Yes.
get that?
Think
Yeah.
so.
And yeah.
I would-
Anything else that we need to look at before we regroup again? Looking for that. Todd is going to research some of the developers. Judy, you're going to talk to Ellers.
TIF policy, yep. Or just a development policy.
Yeah.
TIF procedures and
Yeah.
policies.
My proposal to the library. We need money, not money. We need ideas. Yeah, we need money.
need money
Yeah,
too.
we definitely need money, but we need ideas on if we're going to actively move forward. I mean, we're aggressively approaching moving forward, and it's time to be on board. We're time to be on board with you guys and make a decision whether we're moving forward together or not. So I'm asking you guys to bring your information to the next meeting so we can make a sound decision as a council of how we can move forward with our ideas and yours, if it's a possibility or not. And then both of entities will know where we're sitting and we can both move forward. Is that fair enough?
When is your next committee?
We are going to approach that right now. I think, Judy, how long do you think for your information?
I can't imagine it's gonna take me more than a week. I mean,
Okay,
once they, it could be as soon as a day.
sure. Chad, what's your projected idea with Design Art?
I'll call him. I'm gonna get a cost estimate and if it's something he can do, and
Yeah.
then we can bring that back. I mean, he's not gonna get it done,
Right,
but I can get the information of if that's something that he can work on. I'm gonna talk to Casey too. He's been kind of in the
Yeah.
marketing world too,
Yeah.
to see what I can pick off of him as well. I'd say a week or two should be able to reconvene and go from there.
Todd, do you feel 2 weeks is efficient for you to bring back some information from some developers, at least some names or something, contacts, and maybe we can spread out and open up that workload for contacts?
Sure.
All right.
Maybe we could do
So 2 weeks from today, does that sound feasible? I have nothing on me to find out what the calendar.
So when is economic development?
Okay.
Economic development is the 25th.
25th.
Is that too far out? Or do you not want to?
2 weeks would be 19th, and that 1, 2,
I don't,
4 business days later, we got
I'd be right
economic.
after economic
That's what I'm
development,
thinking.
yeah,
Todd will already be here for that.
Yeah,
That's the 25th.
yeah, that works good.
19th,
That gives us a couple extra days too.
25th.
25th.
well, 25th during with the
Economic
economic development, huh?
Right
On the calendar. Yeah.
So immediate, right after economic.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Right. Any other discussion before we move to adjourn?
Move to eat. I mean, I'll move to adjourn.
To adjourn's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, everybody.
Sorry.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Mike.
Eating.